It is said that before walls were raised, before names were carved into stone, before memory learned how to bind itself into story, there was only night. Not the restless night of cities, not a darkness broken by lamps and restless thought, but a vast and breathing dark, stretched like an ocean across the earth. The sky hung low and endless, scattered with starlight that shimmered like distant embers across an unseen hearth. Wind moved softly through tall, sleeping grass. The land exhaled the cool scent of rain just past, and somewhere, beneath that first sky, a branch still glowed. Who first knelt before a trembling spark and chose not to flee? The question lingers on cold air. In the hush after a storm, lightning had kissed the earth and moved on. What it left behind was not thunder, not ruin, but a quiet orange breath, pulsing faintly from the broken limb of a fallen tree. It did not roar. It did not demand attention. It simply remained, as if remembering something ancient. This is the first invitation. Not to conquer the night, not to master it, but to sit beside it. In forgotten corners of the earth, wanderers once moved across open plains without walls to shelter them. Their days were shaped by hunger and horizon. Their nights belonged to shadow. They knew the sounds of unseen creatures, the sudden rush of wings, the patient gaze of hidden eyes. Darkness was not an enemy, but it was vast. And within that vastness, they were small. It is said that on such a night they noticed the glow. At first from a distance, a pulse against the dark, subtle and strange. They did not run toward it. They circled slowly, cautious as animals approaching an unfamiliar presence. The air near the ember felt different, warmer, scented with something sharp and alive. Smoke lifted in thin spirals, dissolving into the starlit veil above. Fire was not yet a tool. It was not yet harnessed or named. It was a mystery. Some believe it was stolen from lightning, that a brave hand reached into what the sky had abandoned and carried a fragment of storm back to earth. Others whisper that flame was older than thunder, that it rose from hidden roots beneath the soil, waiting for breath and chance to awaken it. No one knows. But they gathered. They crouched around the ember in cautious silence, watching as it shifted and brightened, feeding slowly upon bark and air. When a curious hand reached too close, it withdrew quickly. Fire warmed, but it also bit. It shimmered with beauty, but it devoured what it touched. And so the first lesson arrived without words. Beneath the silence, they learned to sit. They fed the ember gently, placing dry grass beside it, then twigs, then small branches. The spark responded. It grew. It flickered and reached upward, as if remembering how to dance. Shadows leapt across their faces, stretching long against the ground. The night did not vanish, but it softened at the edges. In the glow, something changed. Faces became visible, eyes reflected amber light. Expressions once hidden in darkness now appeared in trembling gold. The circle tightened, not from fear, but from wonder. Fire revealed them to one another. Where memory fades, perhaps this was the moment it first began to gather. It is said that the earliest stories were not told in words, but in gestures and glances around flame, a lifted brow, a soft exhale, a hand pointing toward the sky where lightning once tore open the clouds. The ember became a center, not of power, but of presence. And yet, a quiet contradiction lingered in its heart. The flame protected from cold and hidden eyes, but it also consumed the wood that fed it. It offered warmth, but demanded tending. If neglected, it would fade into ash. If overfed, it would rise wild and uncontrollable. It required attention. It required care. Fire was not conquered. It was entered into relationship. In the flickering glow, the wanderers began to notice something else. Beyond the circle of light, darkness deepened. The fire did not erase the night. It defined it. It created an inside and an outside, a sacred chamber marked by warmth and a vast unknown beyond. Some believe this was the first boundary ever drawn, not by stone, not by wall, but by flame. Within it, breath slowed, shoulders softened, the sounds of the night seemed less immediate, less threatening. Outside, unseen creatures still moved, stars still wheeled in silent spirals overhead, but inside the circle, time behaved differently. It stretched, it lingered, it allowed pause. The fire cracked softly, releasing tiny sparks that rose toward the sky and vanished. Watching them, perhaps someone wondered if the stars themselves were embers scattered across a celestial hearth. The thought would not have formed as we know it, but the feeling may have stirred, a quiet belonging. Around the flame, shadows danced along stone and skin. The shifting light gave movement to stillness. Some say this was the beginning of image, the birth of imagination sparked by flicker and glow. A raised hand cast against rock could become the shape of an animal. A bent branch could resemble antler or wing. The world became layered. There was the seen and the suggested, fire revealed and concealed at once. Beneath its warmth, fear softened into something quieter. The unknown beyond the light remained vast, but it no longer felt empty. It felt shared. The night was not banished. It was witnessed. It is said that the first songs may have begun here, not as melody, but as hum. A low vibration carried through chest and throat, matching the pulse of flame, breath aligning with breath, flame aligning with breath. The ember beneath the first sky did not change the earth in a single night. Mountains did not bow, rivers did not alter course, the stars did not rearrange themselves. But something subtle shifted in the human heart. Fire taught them to sit within shadow without being swallowed. It taught patience. It taught vigilance. It taught that warmth can exist even when darkness surrounds. As hours passed, the flame lowered. Wood turned to coal. Coal softened into red hush. No one spoke of triumph. No one claimed victory overnight. Instead, they watched the embers breathe quietly, as if the earth itself were exhaling through them. Ash began to gather, a pale dust where brightness once lived. Some believed this was the second lesson, that even flame must rest. The wanderers did not scatter immediately. They lingered in the dim glow, reluctant to leave the chamber they had formed. The circle remained visible even as light faded, an imprint upon the ground, a memory in the body. Above them, the sky remained vast and unchanged, marked by the moon, threaded with starlight, indifferent and yet quietly present. Perhaps the first fire did not change the world through force. Perhaps it changed the rhythm of human presence within it. It introduced the possibility of pause, of gathering, of shared breath beneath a common sky. It is said that when the last ember dimmed and only ash remained, someone reached out and touched it gently, feeling warmth still hidden beneath grey dust. The spark was not gone. It was waiting. And so they learned to carry it. Beneath bark, within hollowed wood, cradled like something sacred, not to dominate the dark but to walk beside it. The sky stretched wide above them as they moved on. The grass whispered around their legs. The night did not shrink. But now, within them, a memory glowed, a knowledge without words, that even in vast shadow warmth could be kindled. The ember beneath the first sky dims now in our telling. Its glow softens, its crackle becomes distant, yet the circle it formed still echoes whenever we gather in quiet, whenever we sit before a flame and feel our breath slow to match its rhythm. Perhaps the first fire was never meant to be conquered. Perhaps it was meant to be tended. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And beneath the silence of the ancient night, beneath the wide and patient sky, the memory of that first spark still breathes, small, steady, and sacred. It is said that some doors are not built to be found in daylight. They wait instead beneath a ridge of stone, half veiled by moss and patient roots, marked by the moon and almost forgotten by the sun. On certain nights, when the air is cool and the world feels hushed, a narrow stone gate reveals itself in the side of the earth. It does not call out. It does not shine. It simply opens, dark, curved and silent. This is the invitation. Beyond the threshold, the ground slopes gently inward. The scent of mineral and damp soil gathers in the breath. Footsteps soften without instruction, as if the stone itself prefers quiet company. The outside world fades behind you, its wind, its distant waters, its restless sky. What remains is a chamber shaped like the ribs of an ancient creature, curved and protective, as though the earth has drawn its own breath and held it for centuries. At first, there is only darkness. Then a small lantern is raised, its flame trembles, and in that trembling walls awaken. Ochre, charcoal, faint red and shadowed black. The surface of the cave is not empty stone, but a living gallery of forms suspended in motion. A bison mid-stride, a deer with antlers branching like a winter tree, a horse whose mane seems to ripple when the light shifts. And there, near the entrance, half hidden in shadow, a painted hand pressed against cold rock, fingers splayed, palm open. An echo of breath held for thousands of years. Who placed that hand there, and why? In forgotten corners of the earth, long before temples rose and scrolls were inked, people descended into caves like this one. We know their traces in places scattered across valleys and continents: Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira, names we have given to chambers that once belonged only to silence. The paintings inside them were not hurried. They were deliberate, layered, returned to again and again, as if the stone itself required conversation. But why paint in darkness where sunlight never reaches? Why bring pigment deep beneath the earth, into chambers where no field could be seen and no herd could graze? Some believe these images were prayers for abundance, ceremonies meant to ensure the return of bison, the safe passage of deer, the steady rhythm of life. To paint the animal was to enter into relationship with it, to honor its spirit before the hunt. Others whisper something softer. They say these forms were not about survival alone, but about crossing a veil. The cave, they suggest, was never merely shelter. It was a threshold. Beneath the silence of stone, the boundary between seen and unseen thinned. The walls curved inward like a spiral, guiding the body deeper and deeper into shadow. Each step inward felt less like descent and more like passage. The lantern light moves again, and the painted animals shift with it. In the flicker of flame, their bodies seem to breathe. Hooves lift, flanks ripple, antlers tilt slightly as shadows stretch and retreat. It is said that when firelight danced against these walls long ago, the animals did not appear still. They moved in rhythm with flame, their outlines trembled, their forms pulsed. The cave became not a gallery, but a living chamber where shadows learned to dance. Perhaps that was the intention, to bring fire into darkness, to let movement arise where stone had seemed unmoving. Voices once echoed here, low chants matching the pulse of the earth, the sound of breath drawn in unison, the quiet thud of drums struck slowly, like distant thunder carried through rock. The chamber would have amplified each vibration, sending it back softened and layered. A single word spoken near the entrance might return from deeper corridors as something transformed. Sound behaved differently here. It lingered, it curved, it returned as echo. And in that echo, something ancient stirred. Some believe the painters were shamans, travelers between worlds. They entered the cave not to decorate it, but to journey. The animals painted along the walls were companions of the spirit, guides across an unseen landscape. The cave became a map of passage, its curves and hollows marking stages of transformation. In this telling, the painted hand near the entrance is not a signature. It is a gate, a way of saying, I was here and I crossed. But the contradiction remains, soft and unresolved. Were these paintings meant for human eyes, Or were they offerings to the listening dark alone, because there is something tender in the way these images are hidden? They are not placed on cliffs for all to see. They are not carved into monuments under open sky. They are tucked into chambers where only those willing to enter shadow can find them. Perhaps they were never meant to be displayed. Perhaps they were meant to be felt. Beneath the silence, the cave does not demand explanation. It does not provide instruction. It holds its images with patience. Where memory fades in the world above, where villages crumble and names are lost, the painted bison still lowers its head. The deer still turns in quiet grace. The hand remains pressed against stone, marked by the moon that never reaches it. Dust gathers slowly along the floor, soft as fallen breath. Time moves differently here. Outside, centuries shift like wind through grass. Empires rise and fall, rivers change course. But inside the chamber, the animals remain suspended between motion and stillness. It is said that when modern eyes first entered these caves, they were not prepared for what they found, not because of grandeur, but because of intimacy. The scale of the animals, the curve of their bodies, the careful shading, the knowledge embedded in pigment and stone. How did they see this so clearly in darkness? How did they reach ceilings and recesses without scaffolds as we know them? Whispers tell us they lay on their backs to paint overhead forms, that they ground minerals into fine dust and mixed them with fat and breath, that they returned season after season, layering image upon image, as if the stone remembered and asked for more. The lantern flame lowers slightly now. Shadows thicken in the upper corners of the chamber. The painted hand near the entrance glows softly in amber light. Its fingers are shorter than ours, its outline slightly blurred by time. Whoever pressed it there did so with intention. A hand covered in pigment, a palm laid flat against cold stone, breath held for a moment before release. In that gesture, something passed from body to rock. Presence. Perhaps the cave was never meant to be understood fully. Perhaps it was meant to be entered, to stand in its chamber and feel the way sound curves, to watch shadows flicker along ancient lines, to sense how stone can hold memory without needing to speak. As the lantern dims further, the animals begin to recede into darkness. Their outlines soften, their movement slows. The bison returns to stillness. The deer dissolves into shadow. The spiral of pigment near the far wall becomes indistinct, but the feeling remains. A quiet reverence. The cave does not close with revelation. It closes with breath. Perhaps the paintings were prayers, perhaps they were maps, perhaps they were neither. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some images are not meant to be solved, but to be sat beside, like a flame in darkness, like a hand against stone, like a chamber beneath the earth where shadows learned for a moment to dance. The lantern extinguishes. Darkness returns gently, not as absence, but as presence. The cave remains, holding its secrets, holding its echoes, holding the memory of a painted hand pressed against stone, waiting, as it has always waited, beneath the patient and star-marked sky. It is said that before there were roofs to hold back the rain, before doors were carved to close against the wind, there was a clearing ringed by patient stone, not a grand place, not marked by pillars or walls, only a circle of earth pressed smooth by footsteps, and at its center, a modest flame resting low against the night. This is the invitation. The sky above stretches wide and unbroken, star-marked and ancient. Grass bends softly beyond the clearing, whispering in a language older than speech. The wind moves carefully, as if aware that something sacred is unfolding in the glow. Around the flame, figures gather. They sit close, not from fear, but from instinct. The fire flickers gently, illuminating faces in warm gold and leaving the edges of the world veiled in shadow. Outside the glow, night remains vast and oceanic. Inside there is a chamber of light without walls. The hearth is small, yet it holds them. In forgotten corners of the earth, long before cities rose in stone, people gathered like this beneath the open sky. They carried embers from place to place, shielding them in bark or hollowed bone, guarding the fragile breath of flame as one might guard a sleeping child. Fire was not merely warmth, it was continuity. A living thread passed between days. Here in the clearing it becomes something more. It becomes a center. Around it, silence settles first, then breath, then the soft shift of bodies leaning closer. The crackle of wood is gentle, almost like whispered syllables. Sparks rise briefly, then disappear into darkness, like thoughts returning to the unseen. It is said that the earliest stories were not spoken loudly. They were offered slowly, as one might offer water from a cupped hand, a gesture toward the horizon, a murmur about the river that bends like a silver serpent through distant land, a recollection of stars that once seemed to move differently across the sky. Stories rise like smoke, thin at first, then gathering shape. Some speak of ancestors whose footprints are now dust, of elders who listened to wind and understood its warning, of hunters who followed herds across frozen plains and returned with eyes changed by something they would never fully name. The hearth gathers not only bodies, but memory. Where memory fades in open fields and shifting camps, the circle restores it. The flame becomes a keeper. Its glow holds faces steady long enough for words to take form. The rhythm of speech begins to match the rhythm of crackling wood. Some believe this was where language learned its cadence. Before there were scrolls or carvings, before ink touched parchment, there was breath-meeting flame. Words were shaped in the warm chamber of shared air. They rose and fell with the flicker of light. The pause between sentences felt sacred, as if silence itself were listening. The hearth does not rush the telling, it invites it. A voice lowers, and others lean in. A hand traces patterns in dust near the fire's edge, spirals, circles, shapes that resemble stars. The children watch, the elders nod. Each story settles into those who hear it, becoming part of them. It is said that this is how memory first learned to travel, from breath to breath, from gaze to gaze. The fire reflects in watchful eyes, making them shimmer as if holding tiny constellations within. Shadows dance along stone and skin, and for a moment, the boundary between teller and listener softens. The story becomes shared space, like the glow itself. Yet within this warmth rests a gentle paradox. The hearth unites, but it also divides. It draws a sacred boundary. Inside the circle, faces are known. Voices are recognized. The crackle of flame becomes a familiar pulse. Outside, the dark remains vast and unreadable. Beyond the edge of light, creatures move unseen. Wind carries secrets through tall grass. The night listens, but does not reveal itself fully. Fire becomes both invitation and gate. It welcomes those within its glow, but it also marks what is beyond. It creates an inside and an outside, not in hostility, but in definition. The circle of light gives shape to belonging. It says, "Here, for this moment, we are together." Some believe this was the first architecture, not walls of stone, but a circle drawn in flame, a place where the human heart could rest against the vastness of the sky without feeling lost. Beneath the silence, something deeper unfolds. A child asks a question, not with words, but with wide eyes. The elder answers not with certainty, but with another story. In this exchange, knowledge is not delivered, it is woven. The story of the river becomes a lesson in patience. The tale of a wandering star becomes a reminder of return. The hearth gathers meaning the way wood gathers flame, slowly, with care. And sometimes there is no story at all, only shared quiet. The fire burns low, faces soften, breath deepens. The clearing feels less like a space in the world and more like a chamber carved from time itself. Above them, the sky continues its ancient turning. Stars move in silent spirals. The moon lifts, pale and patient. Marked by the moon, the hearth glows. Whispers tell us that in such circles the first songs were born. Not grand melodies, but simple hums, a low note sustained in harmony with flame, a rhythm tapped lightly against stone. The sound vibrates through the ground, through bone, through memory. Music arises not from performance but from presence. The crackle of wood becomes percussion, the wind becomes chorus, the night itself listens. As hours pass, the flame lowers. It no longer leaps high. It steadies into a gentle glow. Embers form at the center, small, red, breathing. The circle remains unbroken. No one rushes to leave. There is no urgency here. Only the quiet gratitude of warmth shared. Perhaps the first fire did not build walls, but circles. Perhaps it did not teach humanity to conquer the dark, but to sit within it without fear. The hearth does not erase the night. It honors it. The stars above continue their silent watch, indifferent yet constant. The fire below mirrors them, tiny lights against vast shadow. Ash begins to gather at the edges, pale as early frost. It settles like dust upon stone, soft and unassuming. The stories spoken do not vanish when the voices fall silent. They linger in the air, in the posture of those who listened, in the memory carried forward into morning. Where memory fades, the hearth restores it. Not perfectly, not permanently, but long enough for a child to remember the shape of a tale, long enough for a name to be spoken once more before it drifts into silence, long enough for belonging to feel real beneath an endless sky. The final logs shift gently. A spark rises and dissolves into darkness. The circle loosens slowly. One by one, figures lean back, gazing upward. The fire is no longer the brightest light. The stars have reclaimed the night, and yet the warmth remains. It lingers in hands held close to chest, in shoulders no longer tense, in eyes reflecting both flame and constellations. Perhaps the hearth was never meant to last. Perhaps it was meant to gather breath, to gather story, to gather human hearts into a circle beneath the celestial expanse. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some fires burn not to illuminate the world, but to remind us that we belong within it. The embers glow softly now, small, patient, breathing. The ash settles. The night deepens without threat. The stars continue their slow procession across the sky, ancient and steady. In the clearing ringed by stone, the circle remains, visible only in memory, marked by warmth that once lived there. The hearth grows quiet, but its echo travels on. Morning arrives without ceremony. There is no trumpet of light, no grand farewell to what has burned through the night. The sky simply pales, the stars loosen their hold, a thin wash of silver spreads across the horizon, and the world inhales again. Where flame once danced, there is now only a veil of grey ash resting upon stone. This is the invitation. A hand reaches toward the hearth that has gone quiet. Fingertips brush the powder gently, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. The ash yields without resistance. It lifts in a faint cloud, soft as breath, carrying the ghost of warmth within it. It is said that in forgotten valleys, ash was never discarded lightly. It was not seen as ruin, not as waste. It was the final language of fire, a residue of transformation. Where wood had surrendered to flame, ash remained as quiet testimony. It marked the place where heat had lived, where light had spoken. Beneath the silence of early dawn, the hearth looks smaller than it did at night. Without flame, its power seems diminished. Yet something lingers in the grey dust, something patient and almost tender. Some believe the spirit of fire does not vanish. When the blaze subsides, it settles, it softens, it becomes ash. In ancient camps and early villages, this pale powder was gathered carefully. It was smeared upon foreheads before journeys, mixed with water and pressed into the soil before planting, sprinkled over thresholds as protection. It sealed vows whispered beneath moonlight. Ash became a blessing. To touch it was to remember heat without being burned. The narrative drifts outward now, following the ash as wind lifts it from stone. A soft current carries it beyond the circle of the hearth. It moves across grass, still silvered with dew, across earth darkened by night's cool breath. The particles rise and settle, like thoughts dissolving into silence. Where memory fades in open air, ash persists quietly. It settles into soil, it mingles with dust, it slips into the hidden chambers of roots. There is a tenderness in this transformation. What once crackled and leapt with fierce light now lies still and weightless. The fire that demanded attention has surrendered to something quieter. The contradiction is gentle. What appears to be ending is also beginning. Ash speaks of consumption, yet it nourishes. It carries within it the minerals of wood, the trace of tree and branch and leaf. When it meets earth, it does not remain inert. It enriches. It prepares the ground for growth. It becomes unseen sustenance. In forgotten corners of the earth, fields were dusted with ash before sowing. Farmers learned that what had burned could bless what would rise. The remnants of flame made the soil softer, more receptive. Crops grew taller where ash had been scattered. Perhaps the first fire's final gift was not warmth, but fertility. Around abandoned hearths, children once traced circles in the softness of grey powder. They drew spirals with their fingers. They pressed their palms into it, leaving brief impressions that would soon fade. In the ash, they felt the echo of heat long gone. There is something sacred in touching what remains, a reminder that brightness does not last forever, that all things cool, that even the fiercest blaze must rest. It is said that elders would sit before the ash in morning light, contemplating its quiet presence. The absence of flame did not disturb them. They understood its rhythm. Fire rises, fire dances, fire surrenders. Ash is not failure, it is completion. It is beneath the silence. The hearth does not feel empty, it feels fulfilled. Its purpose has been met. The wood gave itself fully. The flame consumed what it needed. Now only the soft residue remains, marked by the memory of light. The wind returns gently, lifting a thin spiral of dust into the air. For a moment it catches sunlight and shimmers faintly, as if holding a final echo of its former glow. Then it disperses, dissolving into the wider world. Where memory fades, ash remembers differently, not with blaze, not with spectacle, but with quiet integration. It slips into soil, into crevices of stone, into folds of cloth. It clings lightly to skin. It becomes part of the everyday, unremarkable, yet essential. Some believe that in ancient rites ash was placed upon the tongue, a taste of transformation, a reminder that what has burned does not vanish entirely. It changes form. It becomes part of breath and bone. The emotional arc deepens now from loss into acceptance. The world does not remain bright forever. Flame cannot be held at its height without consequence. To burn endlessly is to consume endlessly. The cycle requires cooling. It requires surrender. Ash teaches this without words. It teaches humility. It teaches rest. It teaches that letting go is not defeat, but completion. The hearth, once vibrant with crackling wood and rising sparks, now sits in morning stillness. The circle of stones around it remains patient. Their surfaces are dusted in grey, their edges softened by time and touch. Marked by the moon hours earlier, they now receive the quiet gaze of dawn. There is no urgency to rebuild the fire immediately, no panic in the absence of flame. The people who gathered here understand the rhythm. The ember was preserved, perhaps, hidden beneath thicker ash, cradled in a small hollow of bark. Fire will return when called. But for now, the ash holds the space. The narrative lingers in this stillness. A bird calls faintly from beyond the clearing. Grass shifts in morning wind. The sky lightens further, revealing distant hills and the faint curve of a river. The world resumes its motion without spectacle. Yet, within the grey powder at the centre of stone, something sacred remains. Perhaps the first fire's final lesson was not in its blaze, but in its quiet surrender. The blaze dazzled, the ash endures. Beneath the silence, seeds rest in soil enriched by dust. They do not yet rise, they do not yet break open, but within them something stirs, fed by what once burned. The ash has become invisible nourishment, a hidden promise. Whispers tell us that even in later ages, when great cities rose and crumbled, when temples were built of carved stone and adorned with gold, the humble ash retained its sacred role. It marked foreheads in rites of passage. It sealed grief. It symbolized both mourning and renewal. To wear ash was to acknowledge impermanence, to accept that what glows must one day cool, and that cooling is not an end but a return. The chapter closes not with rekindling, but with dispersal. The wind carries the last thin veil of grey across open ground. It settles among grasses. It mingles with dust from distant paths. It becomes indistinguishable from the earth itself. And yet, within that mingling, transformation continues, unseen, unannounced. Perhaps it was never meant to be preserved in brilliance. Perhaps it was meant to dissolve, to return to the whole. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and perhaps ash is one of those voices, a soft reminder that what appears to vanish has merely changed its shape. The hearth is quiet now. The stones remain. The sky has grown bright. Beneath the surface of soil darkened by grey dust, something prepares to rise, green, tender, reaching toward light that will one day burn again. But for now, there is only ash, soft, patient, sacred. And beneath the silence, the memory of fire breathes gently within it, waiting without urgency, as all things do, for their next becoming. It is said that there are nights when the world forgets its colors, when valleys turn to silver and bone, when rivers fall silent beneath glass, when even the wind seems to move more carefully, as if afraid to disturb the vast white hush. On such a night, beneath a sky scattered with star-marked light, a solitary flame trembles against the frozen dark. This is the invitation. A traveler moves slowly across an oceanic expanse of snow. The land stretches outward without boundary, veiled in pale stillness. Each step presses a soft echo into the drift. Breath rises in faint spirals, dissolving into the cold air like a prayer released too gently to be heard. In one hand, held close against the chest, a torch burns. It is not large, it does not roar. Its flame bends and straightens in the wind, flickering amber against the endless white. Yet within its small circle of warmth, the world changes. Shadows gather and retreat. Ice glimmers like scattered stars fallen to earth. The traveler's path becomes visible, step by careful step. Beyond the glow, night remains patient and wide. In forgotten ages of long winter, when glaciers pressed their ancient weight across valleys and frost claimed entire landscapes, humanity did not retreat entirely. It is said that they walked through the frozen veil, guided by sparks carried in bark-wrapped bundles and hollowed stone. Some whispered that the flame held within it a fragment of the sun, a shard of celestial warmth hidden inside wood and ember. To carry fire was to carry a piece of distant light through the most unforgiving silence. The torch hums softly now, resin in the wood cracking as it feeds the small blaze. The sound is almost intimate, like whispered breath. Around it, snow reflects a faint gold, transforming the white expanse into something luminous and sacred. Yet beneath the beauty rests a tension. Fire melts, ice preserves. The meeting of these elements is both delicate and inevitable. Where the traveler steps, the snow compacts. Where the torch lingers too long, frost softens and drips. Fire clears a path, but it also changes what it touches. The frozen world yields slightly in its presence, reshaping itself in response to warmth. Some believe this is how humanity learned to move through hardship, not by conquering it, but by altering it gently. The traveler does not shout into the wind. There is no triumph in the stride, only persistence. The torch is held steadily, shielded from sudden gusts by a cupped hand. The flame leans toward survival, not spectacle. Beneath the silence, something ancient unfolds. In these long winters, fire was not merely comfort, it was passage. It allowed people to cross valleys once feared as endless. It turned ice-bound caves into chambers of refuge. It thawed stiff fingers and hardened roots. It made possible what once seemed unreachable. Whispers tell us of early wanderers who followed herds across frozen plains, carrying embers from one camp to the next. They understood the fragility of flame in wind so cold it could extinguish breath itself. They built stone circles against the gust. They sheltered sparks beneath layers of ash, cradling them as one might cradle a heartbeat. The torch across the frozen vale becomes more than light. It becomes devotion. The sky above is vast, a canopy of silent stars. Constellations wheel slowly, indifferent yet enduring. The moon hangs pale and distant, marking the snow with silver sheen. The traveler's shadow stretches long and dark behind, a companion in the solitude. Each step forward leaves a trace, but the wind is patient. Snow will fall again, footprints will fade, only the act of walking remains. There is a quiet humility in this journey. The frozen world does not bend entirely. Mountains remain firm, rivers sleep beneath ice. The torch does not erase winter, it coexists with it. Perhaps this was the deeper lesson of fire in such lands. Not dominance, not conquest, but companionship. The flame offers warmth without arrogance. It flickers in acknowledgement of the cold, adapting its movement to the breath of wind. It listens as much as it illuminates. Some believe that in ancient cultures of the North, fire was treated as a guest rather than a possession. It was fed carefully, spoken to softly. Stories were told of its origin in the sky, of lightning striking distant trees, of sacred sparks captured from celestial storms. To hold a torch was to hold a fragment of something vast and untamed. The traveler pauses now upon a ridge of snow. The valley below lies silent, a smooth ocean of frost stretching toward a horizon veiled in faint mist. The torchlight flickers against the ice, revealing subtle contours, ridges like frozen waves, drifts shaped by unseen hands. In this moment, warmth feels almost miraculous, and yet it is small. The tension returns gently. Fire can warm, but it can also wound. In such cold, the temptation to burn too fiercely is strong, but excess flame consumes its own source. The traveler understands this balance instinctively. The torch is allowed to breathe, to feed slowly. Humanity learned to walk through cold, not by defeating it, but by carrying warmth gently within. This understanding is older than scrolls, older than carved stone. It is etched in the way hands cup flame against wind, in the way bodies gather close to share heat, in the way stories are whispered around embers while snow falls outside in silent spirals. The journey continues. Footsteps grow slower. The cold presses in. The torch shortens as wood turns to coal. Its flame softens, shifting from bright flicker to steady glow. The traveler finds a hollow in the snow, a slight depression shielded from wind by a rise of stone. Here, the torch is planted upright, its base pressed into frozen ground. The glow pools softly around it. The valley remains immense, the night remains vast, but within this small circle, breath eases. It is said that resilience is not loud. It does not shout against the storm. It does not carve monuments into ice. It endures quietly, one step at a time, one spark at a time. As the wood thins, the flame lowers further. It curls inward, conserving its strength. The snow near its base melts into a shallow hollow, then refreezes as a translucent ring. Fire leaves a trace, even in winter. The traveler sits beside it, hands extended toward warmth. No words are spoken, none are needed. The crackle of ember and the whisper of wind compose a dialogue older than language. Where memory fades, this moment persists, not as a grand victory over frost, but as a quiet testament to coexistence. The torch softens into ember now. Its light is lower, redder, breathing rather than blazing. The sky has shifted slightly. Stars move in their distant arcs. The moon drifts behind a thin veil of cloud. Night closes in, patient and wide. The traveler gathers the remaining ember carefully, shielding it once more. It will be carried onward, nestled beneath bark and ash, a hidden promise of warmth for the next resting place. Perhaps the first fire did not conquer frost. Perhaps it taught that warmth can exist even within the coldest silence. The snow will continue to fall, valleys will freeze again, winds will carve their spirals across the plain, but somewhere within the vast white expanse, a small glow will persist. Carried by careful hands, fed with devotion, breathing quietly against the frozen dark. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the torch across the frozen veil is one of them. A reminder that even in landscapes of ice, a fragment of sun can be held gently, guiding the way without needing to defeat the night. The ember dims to a soft pulse. The traveler rises. The journey resumes. And beneath the silent, star-marked sky, warmth moves forward, small, sacred and enduring. It is said that some fires do not flicker in the open air. They do not tremble in the wind or bend toward breath. They do not ask to be carried in cupped hands. They sleep instead beneath stone, deep, veiled and patient. At twilight, when the sky turns the color of cooling embers and the last light clings to distant ridges, a mountain rises against the horizon. Its peak is wrapped in slow-moving cloud. Its flanks are dark, massive, unmoving. The air around it feels heavy, as if memory itself gathers there. Beneath that vast and patient peak, the earth murmurs with heat unseen. This is the invitation. The shadow of the mountain stretches long across the valley floor. Grass falls quiet beneath its reach. Birds settle into hidden branches. Even the wind lowers its voice, brushing the slopes with careful breath. The mountain does not dominate the landscape with noise or spectacle. It simply exists, immense, silent, and aware. And yet beneath its stone ribs, something ancient stirs. In forgotten corners of the earth, ancient peoples stood before such mountains in reverence. They did not climb them to conquer. They approached them slowly, barefoot upon cooled lava and weathered rock, sensing something beneath the surface that was both sacred and untamed. They believed that fire lived within stone, not the fire of hearth or torch, but a deeper flame, hidden in caverns where no sunlight reached. They had seen the mountain breathe before. They had watched its slopes glow red against a night sky, lava flowing like molten starlight, reshaping valleys in slow and deliberate rivers of heat. It is said that when the earth opened and flame poured forth, the sky itself seemed to lean closer in witness. Lava once moved across the land like a celestial tide, bright, relentless and luminous. It carved new paths through ancient terrain. It buried forests. It sealed rivers beneath hardened crust. In its wake, it left both ruin and renewal. What had been fertile became ash. What had been barren was reborn in mineral-rich soil. The mountain became both cradle and destroyer, a sacred paradox rising beneath the sky. And yet, long after the visible blaze subsided, long after the surface cooled into blackened stone, the deeper fire remained, hidden, steady, eternal in its quiet pulse. The narrative drifts inward now, beyond the outer slopes and into caves warmed by geothermal breath, chambers where steam gathers in soft spirals along ceilings of stone, where water pools faintly warm against rock, shaped by centuries of heat and pressure. Inside these chambers, the earth feels alive, not in motion, but in presence. The walls glisten faintly in lantern light. Moisture clings to surfaces like breath held too long. There is a scent of mineral and ancient dust. A low hum seems to echo through the ground, not a sound heard with ears alone, but a vibration felt beneath the soles of bare feet. Some believed these hidden flames were the planet's heartbeat, that beneath every mountain, beneath every plain and oceanic trench, a vast and molten core burned quietly, sustaining the world above without ever revealing itself fully. They did not know the words we use now, magma, mantle, tectonic drift, but they felt the truth of it in tremor and heat. Whispers tell us that early wanderers would press their palms against warm stone and listen. They listened not for language, but for rhythm, a deep, slow pulse, an echo older than memory. Humanity borrowed a spark from lightning, it is true. They coaxed flame from friction and learned to tend it carefully. But beneath their feet, far deeper than hearth or torch could reach, a greater fire waited, vast and untamed. The mountain held that fire. The flame in hand was fragile, dependent on wood and wind. The flame in earth was enduring, fed by forces beyond sight. It did not flicker. It did not bow to breath. It existed whether witnessed or not. There is humility in this realization. Standing at the mouth of a cave, warmed by hidden heat, one feels small. The torch carried into such a chamber seems almost symbolic, a faint imitation of the deeper glow that lives within the mountain itself. Perhaps the first fire was not invention, perhaps it was remembrance, an echo of something older than memory. In ancient myths across distant lands, mountains were described as pillars connecting earth and sky. Some cultures believed they were the bones of the world. Others saw them as sleeping giants, their breath rising as mist along forested slopes. And always there was fire. In some tellings, gods forged lightning at the peaks. In others, dragons of molten flame coiled beneath the crust, their movements causing tremor and eruption. Even in quieter traditions, there was acknowledgement that stone was not inert, that beneath its cool surface lay something luminous. Beneath the silence of the valley at twilight, the mountain seems to inhale and exhale. The air shifts subtly as night deepens. The sky grows darker, and stars begin to pierce the blue-black veil. Marked by the moon, the peak glows faintly silver, its slopes appearing calm and immovable. But below that calm, heat persists. The earth is never truly cold. Even beneath glaciers and frozen tundra, warmth stirs in hidden layers. The crust may cool, but the core remains bright. This truth, sensed long before it was understood, shaped early reverence. To approach a volcano was not merely to approach danger, it was to approach origin. Ash that once buried valleys later nourished forests. Lava that once destroyed villages hardened into fertile ground. The paradox was unavoidable. Fire destroys, fire creates. The mountain embodied both. Emotion deepens into humility. The traveler who stands before such a peak at dusk feels the scale of time differently. Human lifetimes flicker like sparks against geological ages. Empires rise and fall in the blink of the mountain's patience. Civilizations carve names into rock, only for the rock itself to shift and reclaim them. Where memory fades, the mountain endures. Its crumbled slopes bear witness to cycles of eruption and stillness. Its ridges hold scars of past flame. Yet it does not boast. It does not announce its power unless stirred by forces deeper than surface weather. Inside the cave, the lantern flame flickers against damp stone. Its glow reveals mineral veins running like frozen lightning through rock. Steam curls upward in delicate spirals. Droplets fall from ceiling to floor in slow, rhythmic intervals. Each drop echoes. The chamber feels like a lung, breathing, listening. Perhaps those who once entered such places did not seek to control the hidden fire. Perhaps they came to remember it, to feel its presence beneath their own, to recognize that the warmth in their chests, the pulse in their veins, was not separate from the warmth beneath the earth. The flame in hand is fragile. The flame in earth is eternal. yet both are part of the same unfolding. As night gathers fully around the mountain silhouette, the valley falls into shadow. The stars intensify, the wind carries a faint scent of sulfur and stone. The mountain remains unmoving, yet alive with unseen force. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the hidden fire beneath stone is one of those voices. It does not roar endlessly, it does not blaze without pause. It waits, it pulses, it remembers. The chapter closes not with eruption, but with quiet. The lantern is lowered. The cave grows dim. The warmth remains faintly present in the air, a reminder of what sleeps below. Outside, beneath the vast and patient sky, the mountain stands, ancient, sacred, veiled. Its hidden flame continues its slow and steady breath, unseen, unclaimed, eternal in its silence. Perhaps the first spark held in human hands was only a reflection, a small, trembling echo of the deeper fire that has always burned beneath our feet. And as the stars wheel above and night settles into its own stillness, the mountain keeps its secret, holding within its stone heart a glow that does not fade. The world cools, the air grows still, but beneath it all, the hidden flame endures, patient, immense and quietly alive. It is said that not all homes are built of stone. Some are carried. Some sway gently from a wooden staff as dusk settles over an open plain, their light moving in rhythm with footsteps and breath. This is the invitation. The horizon is veiled in violet haze. Grass bends beneath a patient wind, each blade whispering against the next like pages turning in a forgotten scroll. The sky lowers itself slowly toward night, releasing the last warmth of day in long strands of fading gold. Across the vast expanse, a solitary figure walks. From the crook of a wooden staff, a lantern swings softly. Its glass is smudged with travel. Its flame trembles within, a modest glow cupped against gathering dark. The movement of the lantern is unhurried, forward and back, casting long shadows across the undulating sea of grass. There are no walls here, no gates, no permanent hearth carved into earth. And yet, within that small circle of light, something sacred persists. In forgotten corners of the earth, nomads once carried flame across landscapes without boundary. They did not anchor themselves to mountains or riverbanks for long. They followed herds and seasons. They listened to the wind's direction and the quiet pull of stars. Their maps were written in sky and soil. The lantern became their constant, a moving hearth. It is said that wherever they paused, beneath a rise of hills, beside a slow river, within a shallow valley sheltered from wind, the lantern was placed upon the earth first. Only then would tents be raised. Only then would blankets unfurl and kettles rest upon stone. The flame did not claim the land. It acknowledged it. Tea would steam in small metal cups, its breath rising in pale spirals that caught the lantern's glow. Songs drifted into twilight, low, rhythmic, woven from memory and wind. Stories, carried from one horizon to another, found temporary shelter beneath fabric walls, stitched from hide and thread. The lantern's light was modest, yet it held warmth against vastness. Beyond its glow, the plains remained endless and oceanic. The sky arched immense and indifferent. The world could feel both beautiful and unforgiving at once. But within the ring of light, faces were illuminated. Hands were seen, eyes reflected gold. The lantern created a chamber without walls, a circle that moved. Whispers tell us that in these traveling camps, sacred space was not fixed. It unfolded wherever the lantern rested. Rituals were not bound to temples. They rose from the ground like breath, shaped by presence rather than permanence. Yet fragility lingered in every step. A sudden gust could extinguish the flame. A careless movement could tip the lantern into dust. To carry fire is to carry responsibility. The traveler walking now across the violet plain knows this. The staff is held steady. The lantern is shielded instinctively when wind sharpens. Each step is mindful, not hurried. The flame within glass seems almost aware of its task. It bends, then straightens. It dances, then steadies. There is tension in this dance between motion and preservation. Fire, when fixed in stone, can grow secure. But carried across shifting ground, it must remain humble. It cannot flare too boldly, or it will consume its own shelter. It cannot shrink too faintly, or it will vanish into dark. The nomads understood this balance. Some believed that their relationship with fire was more intimate because it was transient. They did not build grand altars of carved rock. They did not encase flame in towering walls. Instead, they nurtured it daily, fed it gently, guarded it from wind, carried it across miles of dust and grass. Fire became companion. It listened to the same winds they did. It rested beneath the same stars. The narrative drifts outward now, following the traveler as twilight deepens into night. The violet haze gives way to indigo. One by one, stars emerge, celestial, distant, patient. The moon lifts pale above the horizon, marking the plains in silver light. The lantern's glow grows warmer by contrast. It is said that in certain regions, nomadic peoples believed that stars were ancient fires fixed in the sky. To carry a lantern was to echo that distant brilliance in miniature, to hold a fragment of heaven near the earth. Perhaps this is why they treated it with reverence. The traveler pauses upon a gentle rise. Below, the plain stretches in waves of shadow and moonlight. The lantern is lowered carefully to the ground. A small circle of stones is arranged, not as fortress but as cradle. The tent rises slowly, fabric whispering in night air. Ropes are tied, stakes pressed into soil. The lantern remains at the center, breathing softly. Inside the tent, shadows soften. Tea is poured. The steam rises in spirals that dissolve into darkness above. Voices murmur, not loudly, but in a tone that matches the pulse of flame. A story begins, perhaps of a river crossed weeks ago, perhaps of ancestors who once followed the same stars across the same plains. The tale moves slowly, carried by rhythm rather than urgency. The lantern listens. It flickers gently as if in response. Yet even in this sanctuary of fabric and light, the vastness remains just beyond. The wind presses lightly against canvas. The plains continue their endless stretch. The knowledge that tomorrow will require movement again lingers quietly. The paradox deepens. The lantern makes home possible without walls. It proves that warmth can exist without permanence, but it also reminds those gathered that nothing is fixed. At dawn, the tent will fold, the stones will scatter, footprints will fade in dust. Only the lantern will travel onward, carrying within it the echo of each resting place. Some believe that this wandering hearth shaped a different understanding of belonging. Home was not defined by geography, but by presence, by the gathering of breath around flame, by the circle drawn in light, even if only for a single night. Perhaps the first fire did not bind humanity to place. Perhaps it allowed wandering without losing warmth. The night deepens now. Songs quiet into hums. The tea kettle empties. One by one, figures lie back upon woven blankets. The lantern's flame lowers slightly, shifting from bright flicker to steady ember. Outside, the stars assume their ancient vigil. They have watched countless journeys. Countless lanterns carried across countless plains. The traveler, half asleep, glances once more at the flame. It glows gently, casting a final wash of amber against tent walls. Shadows no longer dance sharply. They blur and soften, merging with the fabric's folds. Beneath the silence, the lantern rests. Its glass cools slowly. Its flame breathes without hurry. In the vastness beyond, wind moves through grass like an oceanic tide. The moon drifts higher. Constellations shift in patient arcs. The chapter closes without finality. The lantern dims, not extinguished, only lowered, conserving warmth for another dawn. Perhaps it was never meant to burn fiercely. Perhaps it was meant to accompany. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the lantern that wandered with the nomads is one of those voices, a reminder that sacred space is not anchored to stone, but kindled wherever presence gathers. The flame softens into ember, the plains stretch wide and veiled, and beneath the star-marked sky, warmth rests lightly upon the earth, ready to rise and wander once more. It is said that some messages are written not in ink, but in flame. On a night when the wind has stilled and the valley lies hushed beneath a canopy of star-marked sky, a solitary blaze flickers atop a distant hill. It is small, so small it might be mistaken for a wandering star fallen too low, and yet it holds its place against the endless dark. This is the invitation. From the floor of the valley, one might pause and ask softly, is it welcome or warning? The hill rises in silhouette, a gentle curve against the horizon. Grass moves faintly along its slopes, silvered by moonlight. The blaze at its crest trembles, bending toward the wind, then straightening once more. Around it, darkness gathers like a patient cloak. In forgotten valleys across ancient lands, signal fires once threaded settlements together through silence. Long before scrolls were sealed and riders carried messages across dust and river, flame leapt from hill to hill in a chain of luminous echoes. One blaze answered another. Across ridges and ravines, over forests and crumbled stone, fire spoke in the only language it knew: light. It is said that watchers kept vigil through the night, eyes trained upon distant heights. They stood beside prepared pyres of dry wood and resin, waiting for a spark to rise on the horizon. When a flame appeared, they did not shout. They did not question aloud. They simply answered, striking their own fire to life. And so, without sound, a message traveled. But what did it say? That remains veiled. Whispers tell us that in some regions a single flame meant peace, 2 flames meant danger, 3 meant gathering. In others, the pattern was more subtle, a long burn or a brief one, a steady glow or a quick flare. Yet those who saw the blaze could not hear its meaning. It was presence without explanation, a reassurance perhaps, or a warning perhaps, carried in light alone. The narrative drifts now through hills layered in shadow, where ancient watchtowers once stood, simple structures of stacked stone, crumbled by time, yet still aligned with distant peaks. From one vantage point, the line of sight extended far beyond the valley, connecting one height to the next in a silent conversation of fire. The watchers were patient people. They understood the cost of flame. To light a signal was to announce something beyond oneself. It was to alter the night. It was to break the hush with radiance, and so the blaze atop the distant hill tonight trembles with quiet significance. Is it welcome or warning? The question lingers not in fear, but in wonder. Beneath the silence of the valley, a figure stands and watches. The air is cool against the skin. Breath drifts in pale spirals. The solitary flame pulses faintly, sometimes brightening, sometimes dimming as wind passes across its crown. It does not shout its meaning. It simply burns. Some believe that signal fires were less about urgency and more about connection. In vast landscapes where settlements were scattered like islands in an oceanic plain, the sight of distant flame meant something simple and profound. You are not alone. Someone else keeps vigil beneath the same sky. Fire became language without words, an echo of presence carried in light. The contradiction rests gently in uncertainty. Those who saw the blaze could not hear its story. They could only respond or remain still. They could not know if the flame marked celebration or alarm. Yet even without clarity, it drew attention. It stirred the heart. Presence is powerful, even without explanation. In ancient chronicles carved into stone and preserved in brittle scrolls, there are quiet mentions of beacon chains, of flames ignited in sequence to signal invasion or arrival. In distant lands, from windswept coasts to mountain passes, these fires served as both shield and invitation. Yet beyond recorded history, beyond the measured language of scribes, there remains something more tender, the simple human act of lighting a fire where it can be seen. On the distant hill, sparks rise briefly into the night, then fade like tiny constellations dissolving into black. The blaze leans sideways under a passing gust, then steadies again. It is neither frantic nor grand. It is steady. Beneath the silence, the valley feels different now. Though no sound has travelled, though no words have crossed the space between hill and plain, a thread has formed. The figure watching below feels it, a quiet connection. Emotion moves slowly from curiosity to reassurance. The flame does not demand response. It does not insist upon meaning. It simply exists, an ember of awareness in the vast dark. Perhaps that is enough. In forgotten corners of the earth, there were nights when signal fires dotted entire horizons, each one small, each one distinct. Together, they formed a chain of light that curved along ridges like a celestial necklace fallen to ground. Yet even a single blaze could shift the mood of the land. Where darkness felt absolute, the presence of flame suggested watchfulness, care, intent. It is said that in some valleys, elders would tell children stories of distant fires, of unseen friends keeping vigil. The children would gaze toward hills at dusk, hoping to glimpse a spark against the violet haze. And when they did, their hearts would soften, not because they understood, but because they felt accompanied. The blaze atop the hill begins to lower slightly now. Its wood settles inward. The flames curl closer to their source. The wind moves more gently. The stars above continue their patient arc, indifferent yet constant. The question remains unanswered. Is it welcome or warning? Perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it is simply a reminder that in the vastness of night, light can travel farther than voice, that across distance and silence, flame can bridge unseen space. The narrative lingers as darkness gradually reclaims the hill. The blaze softens into ember. Its bright edge dims to a red pulse barely visible against shadow. Yet even as the visible light fades, the memory of it lingers. The eye holds warmth for a moment after flame has vanished. A faint glow remains upon the vision, like an afterimage pressed gently into awareness. Where memory fades, the echo of light endures. The valley grows still once more. The figure below lowers their gaze. The sky above remains vast, studded with cold and distant stars. The hill returns to silhouette, its crown unmarked by visible fire. And yet something has shifted. Someone else watched tonight. Someone else stood beneath the same celestial arch and tended a blaze against wind. The chapter closes without proclamation. The hill rests in shadow. The valley breathes quietly. Perhaps it was never meant to be deciphered. Perhaps it was meant to be seen. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some flames burn not to explain, but to remind that beyond the dark curve of land, beyond the silence between hills, another presence flickers gently in the night. The stars resume their ancient vigil. The memory of light lingers like warmth upon the eye, and in the hush that follows, the valley rests, quietly aware that somewhere, someone once answered the dark with fire. It is said that not all sacred fires rise high enough to be seen from afar. Some burn quietly within walls of clay, hidden beneath woven reeds and patient stone, glowing not for spectacle, but for sustenance. On a night when the moon hangs low and silver, a small shelter rests at the edge of a field, newly harvested. The air carries the faint scent of grain and dust. Inside, beneath a roof stitched from reeds and shadow, a clay oven breathes with a soft and steady warmth. This is the invitation. Its rounded body curves like a resting animal, smooth and earthen, shaped by hands that pressed wet soil into form and left their faint fingerprints beneath its surface. The mouth of the oven glows amber from within. Embers pulse gently, as if the heart of the shelter beats inside its walls. Beside it, a wooden bowl cradles ground grain mixed with water. The dough is pale and yielding, shaped into simple rounds. Fingers press it flat, leaving quiet spirals across its surface. A final breath is exhaled before the dough is placed within the oven's warmth. Grain meets fire. Earth meets flame. In forgotten corners of the earth, when early villages began to root themselves near rivers and fertile valleys, fire changed its role. No longer only a beacon against darkness or a torch carried across plains, it entered the rhythm of daily life. It crouched low inside clay chambers. It whispered beneath cooking pots. It transformed harvest into nourishment. Some believed cooking was sacred alchemy, that within the rounded chamber of clay, earth and water were offered to flame and return changed, softer, fragrant, sustaining. The oven became a womb of warmth, a hidden heart within the home. Outside, the moon rests upon fields of cut grain, its light silvering the stubble left behind. The village lies quiet beyond the shelter, small dwellings arranged in patient clusters. Smoke from earlier fires drifts upward in faint ribbons, dissolving into night. Inside, the clay oven glows. The dough begins to rise. It is said that the first time grain was ground into flour and mixed with water, it was an experiment born of necessity. Raw kernels were hard against the teeth, resistant and stubborn, but when crushed between stone and softened by flame, they yielded something new, bread, warm and fragrant, capable of sustaining not only the body but the spirit. The oven does not roar, it hums softly. The flame within it must be tended with care. Too little heat, and the bread remains heavy, unformed. Too much, and it blackens, turning nourishment into ash. Balance is delicate. The tending becomes devotion. A hand reaches in with a simple wooden paddle. The bread is turned gently. The scent deepens, earthy, warm, almost sweet. Steam rises in pale spirals, catching the lantern light before vanishing. Around the oven, silence feels full rather than empty. There is no need for grand ceremony. The transformation itself is ritual enough. The grain that once stood tall in fields now rests inside clay, changed by heat into something that can be shared. Some believe that this was when fire moved fully into the human heart, not as force, but as companion, not as blaze against cold, but as steady warmth shaping daily life. Beneath the silence of the shelter, the oven holds memory. Its inner walls are darkened by countless firings. Layers of soot and smoke cling to its curved ceiling, marking seasons of harvest and hunger alike. It has witnessed births and mourning, laughter and quiet endurance. Whispers tell us that in early settlements along ancient rivers, the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, clay ovens stood at the center of communal courtyards. Women and men rose before dawn to tend coals buried beneath ash. Children carried water from wells, their footsteps echoing against mud-brick walls. Bread baked slowly as sunlight crept across fields. The oven became more than tool, it became rhythm. Fire, once wild and wandering, now rested within shaped earth. Humanity had not conquered it. They had invited it inward, contained it gently within walls molded by hand. The paradox lingers softly. Fire softens what is hard, yet it demands constant care. The flame must be fed, the embers must be watched, the oven must be cleaned of ash, its cracks repaired with fresh clay. To neglect it is to invite hunger. To overfeed it is to invite ruin. Within this delicate balance, a quiet understanding grew. Transformation requires attention. The bread is lifted from the oven now. Its surface is browned and slightly cracked. When broken open, steam escapes like breath released from held silence. The interior is tender, pale, and warm. Hands reach. The bread is torn and passed. There is something sacred in shared sustenance. The act of dividing what has been made whole by fire carries its own quiet reverence. Around the bread, conversation softens. Gratitude lingers without being named. Outside, the moon climbs higher, marked by faint veils of drifting cloud. The fields rest after harvest, their work complete for now. The village hum quiets as families gather within their own shelters. The oven continues to glow. It is said that in some cultures, the hearth fire was never allowed to die entirely. Embers were banked beneath ash overnight, preserving a faint heat that could be coaxed back to life at dawn. To relight from nothing was seen as wasteful, even dangerous. Better to carry forward the memory of flame. The clay oven beneath the moon becomes keeper of that memory. Its warmth lingers long after the last loaf has been drawn. The interior walls retain heat, radiating softly into the shelter. Even when flame subsides to ember, the oven holds the echo of transformation. Perhaps the first fire changed everything not through conquest, but through transformation. It did not simply protect against cold or signal across hills. It taught humanity how to soften what was once hard. Grain into bread, clay into vessel, silence into shared presence. Emotion deepens into quiet gratitude. The day's labor is complete. Hands are washed in a basin of cool water. Children drift into sleep upon woven mats. Elders lean back against mud-brick walls, their eyes reflecting the last faint glow from the oven's mouth. The fire within has lowered to a gentle pulse. Ash gathers lightly at its base. Where memory fades in fields and seasons shift without pause, the oven remains. Patient, rounded, enduring. Its surface bears small cracks from years of use, each one filled and smoothed with care. It is imperfect. It is alive with history. Moonlight filters through the reed roof in pale threads, resting upon clay and ash. The shelter feels like a chamber suspended between earth and sky, a space where fire has been welcomed inward and taught to rest. Perhaps it was never meant to be grand. Perhaps it was meant to be daily. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the quiet glow of a clay oven beneath the moon is one of those voices, a reminder that change need not be dramatic to be profound. The embers settle further, their red softening into a deep and steady warmth. The shelter grows still. Outside, the wind moves gently through harvested fields, carrying the faint scent of straw and soil. The oven remains warm, holding within its curved walls the memory of flame. The chapter closes not with extinguishing, but with resting. Moonlight rests upon clay and ash. The night breathes softly around a village nourished and at peace. And within the quiet chamber of earth shaped by human hands, the hidden heart of fire continues to glow, teaching, as it always has, that transformation is the most enduring light of all. It is said that the truest fire is not the one that leaps highest, but the one that knows how to rest. Night has grown deep. The voices have quieted. The wind has softened into a slow, wandering breath across the darkened earth. Above, the sky stretches vast and star-marked, an oceanic canopy scattered with distant light. The moon has drifted beyond the ridge, leaving only silver memory along the horizon. At the center of a ring of stone, beneath a veil of pale ash, a single ember glows. This is the invitation. It does not flare. It does not demand attention. It pulses faintly, an inward breath of red within vast shadow. If one did not look carefully, it might be missed entirely. The hearth appears abandoned, its wood consumed, its flame surrendered to the long quiet of night. But beneath the silence, something remains. Ancient keepers of fire understood this moment. They knew that flame need not burn endlessly to remain alive. They knew the difference between blaze and essence. When the logs had collapsed into coals and the last visible tongues of light withdrew, they did not scatter the remains. They gathered ash gently, drawing it over the ember like a blanket. Fire was allowed to sleep. In forgotten corners of the earth, embers were preserved like hidden treasure, carried from camp to camp inside hollowed bark, tucked into clay vessels lined with dust, shielded from wind as carefully as one shields breath in winter air. The ember beneath ash was never abandoned. It was trusted. It is said that elders would sit long after others had drifted into rest, watching the faint pulse beneath grey powder. They did not stir it unnecessarily. They did not feed it more wood than needed. They simply bore witness to its quiet persistence. The smallest spark contains the memory of blaze. This is the gentle contradiction. What once roared and danced and illuminated faces now appears nearly gone, reduced to a single glowing point, no larger than a thumbprint. Yet within that red core sleeps the possibility of warmth, of light, of gathering once more. Beneath the silence, the hearth is not empty. It is chamber. The darkness that surrounds it no longer feels like threat. It feels vast and patient, like the interior of a great cathedral carved not of stone, but of night itself. The ember rests at the center of that chamber, steady and aware. Breath slows, awareness widens. The world beyond the ring of stones fades into shadow, but the mind does not strain against it. The darkness becomes a companion rather than an adversary. It holds the ember gently, framing its glow without diminishing it. Some believe this was one of the earliest lessons fire offered humanity, not how to conquer night, but how to sit within it without fear. The blaze taught courage. The ember teaches trust. Whispers tell us that in ancient villages, the final act before sleep was not extinguishing but tending. Ash was drawn carefully over coals. A small hollow was shaped to cradle warmth. The keeper would test the breath of heat with the back of a hand, ensuring it still pulsed faintly beneath the dust. They understood rhythm, ignition and rest, light and surrender. To demand endless flame would be to demand endless consumption. Wood would vanish, forests would thin, the balance would break. Instead, they allowed fire to follow its natural arc, from spark to blaze to ember to quiet glow. Perhaps the first fire was never meant to burn without pause. Perhaps it was meant to teach the wisdom of cycles. The ember flickers faintly now, responding to a subtle shift in air. A breeze passes over the hearth, stirring a small spiral of ash. For a moment the red brightens, just slightly, before settling again into near invisibility. Even in sleep, fire listens. Even in stillness, it breathes. In forgotten valleys and along ancient riverbanks, there were nights when storms threatened to swallow the hearth entirely. Rain fell in sheets, wind tore at tents and roofs of woven reed. In those moments the ember was shielded first, protected beneath overturned pots or wrapped in damp-resistant bark. It was not pride that drove this care, it was memory. The memory of what flame could become when invited. The narrative lingers here, in the hush between visible glow and full extinguishing. The ember no longer illuminates the faces of those who once gathered around it. It no longer casts dancing shadows along stone. It does not call stories into the air, and yet it remains profoundly alive. There is humility in this state. The ember does not insist upon being seen. It does not crave witness. It simply endures. Some believe that beneath the surface of the earth itself, vast embers glow, hidden rivers of molten heat that pulse slowly over centuries. What we call flame on the surface may be only a brief echo of deeper warmth. In this way, the single ember beneath ash mirrors something cosmic, small yet connected to something immeasurable. Where memory fades, warmth lingers. The ring of stones around the hearth holds its shape in moonless dark. Each stone bears marks of soot and weather. They have witnessed countless ignitions, countless gatherings, countless quiet endings. They know this rhythm. The ember softens further now, its red dimming to a deeper shade, almost black. Only the keenest eye would detect the faint pulse that remains. But it is there, waiting, not in urgency, in patience, Emotion settles into acceptance. There is no sorrow in the fading of flame tonight, no anxiety over darkness. The world has cooled. The bodies that once warmed themselves near the fire now rest beneath blankets of woven fibre. The stars continue their slow procession above. All is as it should be. Perhaps the first fire did not come to teach humanity how to dominate the night. Perhaps it came to teach how to move with it, to rise when needed, to rest when called, to trust that warmth does not vanish simply because it cannot be seen. The ember beneath ash embodies this truth. Its glow is nearly imperceptible now. The ash above it settles completely, forming a soft, pale covering that hides what remains. To an unknowing glance, the hearth appears cold. But beneath the surface, warmth waits. It is said that at dawn, before the sky has fully lightened, a gentle breath can coax the ember awake. A careful stirring, a whisper of air, a small offering of kindling placed just so. And suddenly, quietly, the red deepens. A thin ribbon of smoke rises, a faint spark leaps upward. Flame returns, not as miracle, but as continuation. The chapter does not close with extinguishing, it closes with promise. The ember fades into near invisibility, yet the memory of blaze remains woven within it. The darkness around the hearth grows complete, but it is no longer heavy. It is chamber, it is cradle, it is rest. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the last ember is one of those voices, a reminder that endings are often disguises for pauses, that surrender is not loss, that beneath ash and silence, warmth persists unseen. Night settles fully now. The stars keep their patient watch. The hearth appears quiet, veiled, still. But beneath the ash, in the smallest red pulse of remembered light, the future of flames sleeps gently, waiting for breath, waiting for dawn. It is said that not every fire is meant to guide a ship to shore. Some are meant only to be glimpsed. On a night when the sea lies wide and breathing beneath a silvered moon, a faint glow appears upon the horizon. It is not bright enough to command attention. It does not flare like a beacon demanding arrival. It rests there, soft, amber, almost uncertain, hovering where ocean meets sky. This is the invitation. The sailors aboard the small wooden vessel pause in their quiet song. The oars dip more slowly. The sail, caught in a gentle wind, sighs rather than strains. One of them lifts his gaze toward the distant shimmer. There, again, a pulse of light, and then it is gone. Across moonlit waters, legends have long spoken of an island where fires once burned without smoke, a shore veiled in mist, cliffs pale as bone beneath starlight, trees that bent as if listening, their leaves whispering secrets into the wind. Whispers tell us that the fires on that island were unlike any others. They rose without hunger. They did not devour wood with restless appetite. They burned low and steady, honoring darkness rather than conquering it. But the island itself, some believe, never wished to be claimed. In forgotten corners of the sea, maps were once drawn with careful hands, inked with coastlines and imagined shoals. Cartographers left blank spaces where rumor exceeded certainty. In those empty places, the island was sometimes sketched faintly. No coordinates, no firm outline, only a suggestion. And then over time, even that suggestion vanished. It withdrew from parchment. It slipped beyond the reach of measured line. The sailors tonight know these stories. They have heard them murmured between cups of salt-stung water and crusts of hardened bread. They sing of the island in low tones when the wind grows quiet, not as destination, but as presence. The glow appears once more, a fragile warmth upon the horizon. It flickers like a distant ember seen through half-closed eyes. One sailor leans forward, heart stirring with quiet longing. Is it real, or is it the ocean playing gently with light? The contradiction deepens. Fire reveals. Yet this island remains hidden. How can a flame be visible and unreachable at once? Some believe the island appears only to those who approach without hunger in their hearts, not hunger for conquest, not hunger for possession, but the deeper hunger that seeks to name and anchor what is meant to remain fluid. It is said that many ships chased the glow with urgency. They turned their rudders sharply toward it. They called out across wind and wave. But the closer they sailed, the more the light dissolved, veiled by fog, swallowed by mist, absorbed into the vastness of sea. And so the island drifted further, not in movement across water, but in movement across perception. Beneath the silence of the open ocean, the vessel tonight moves without haste. The sailors do not shout. They do not adjust their course dramatically. They allow the glow to remain what it is, brief, tender, uncertain. The sea around them is calm, its surface reflecting the moon in broken spirals. The oars rest lightly against wood. The sail breathes in and out like a chest at peace. In the distance, where the glow had shimmered, fog begins to gather, soft veils rising from water as dawn approaches. The horizon blurs. Some believe the island once held a small community who grew weary of being watched. They built their fires low. They shaped their dwellings from pale stone and driftwood. They sang to the sea not for rescue, but for remembrance. Their fires did not blaze high to summon ships. They burned to honor night. Whispers tell us that these islanders believed darkness was not enemy, but partner. That light exists not to banish shadow, but to move within it gently. Their flames were offerings, small acknowledgments of warmth in an oceanic world. Over generations, the island withdrew. Storms seemed to guard its shores. Currents shifted subtly around its reefs. Fog gathered when strangers approached with too much certainty. The contradiction rests quietly in the sailor's chest. He wishes to see the island clearly, and yet he senses that clarity would diminish its meaning. The narrative floats between longing and surrender, between desire to arrive and acceptance of distance. The sailor lowers his gaze briefly, listening to the hush of water against hull. Perhaps some flames exist only to remind, not to deliver. The faint glow returns once more, softer now, barely distinguishable from the reflection of stars upon wave. It trembles, then steadies, then fades again as a thicker veil of mist drifts across the horizon. No landmass is revealed, no cliff line rises, no shore calls. The sea remains open and vast. In ancient mariner lore, there were tales of phantom islands, lands that appeared at twilight and vanished by morning. Some were born of shifting sandbanks, others of volcanic stone rising briefly from depths before sinking again, and some, perhaps, of longing itself. The sailor understands now that the island may never be reached, and yet its presence has already changed him. The glow upon the horizon has softened his urgency. It has reminded him that not every light demands pursuit, that not every destination requires arrival. As dawn approaches, the eastern sky grows pale, the stars withdraw one by one, the moon dims into translucence, the fog thickens, wrapping the horizon in a gentle shroud. The glow dissolves into mist. There is no dramatic extinguishing, no final flare, only a quiet merging of light and vapor. The sailor stands at the bow, hands resting lightly on worn wood. He breathes in the salt air. He does not feel loss. He feels something gentler, acceptance. Perhaps the island was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant to drift just beyond flame, close enough to be seen, distant enough to remain whole. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some flames exist only to remind us of our own. The ship continues forward across open sea. The oars resume their slow rhythm. The sail catches the first hint of morning wind. Around them, the ocean stretches wide and unclaimed. The memory of light lingers like warmth upon the soul. Though the island remains veiled, though its fires burn beyond reach, the sailor carries within him a small ember of understanding. That longing does not always require fulfillment. That distance can be sacred. that mystery need not be solved to be honored. The chapter closes upon open water. Dawn spreads in soft layers of rose and gold. The horizon clears, revealing nothing but sea and sky. And yet, beneath the surface of memory, a faint glow remains, steady, quiet, and kind. Perhaps somewhere beyond sight, beyond map and measure, an island drifts still, its fires low and smokeless, honoring darkness beneath a patient sky. And the sea, vast and listening, keeps its secret. It is said that some places are built not to shelter the body, but to steady the soul. On a stretch of open land, where grass bows low to wind and the horizon curves like a quiet breath, a ring of weathered stones stands beneath a patient sky. No roof covers them, no walls close them in. They rise from the earth as if grown there, rough, ancient, crumbled at the edges by rain and centuries of waiting. At the center of the ring, a small flame flickers. This is the invitation. The sky above is vast and star-marked, its deepening blue veiled with the first shimmer of night. The stones cast long shadows upon the ground, their silhouettes aligned with something unseen. Perhaps the memory of sunrise, perhaps the path of the moon. Their placement is not random. It is geometry softened by time. Some lean inward slightly as though listening. Others stand upright and resolute, their surfaces carved not by human hand alone, but by wind, dust, and passing seasons. Lichen clings to them like pale script that cannot quite be read. At the center the flame moves gently. It is modest. No roaring blaze, no towering pillar of fire. It rests low, breathing in small golden tongues, illuminating the ground in a circle that mirrors the ring of stone. In forgotten corners of the earth, ancient builders raised such circles not as fortresses, but as instruments of listening. They did not stack stone for defense. They arranged it in careful arcs aligned with sunrise at solstice, with moonrise at certain tides of the year, with distant stars that return only after long absence. It is said that these builders watched the sky more closely than they watched their own shadows. They traced the slow spiral of seasons. They observed how light moved along the horizon in winter and summer, how the sun lingered or withdrew, how the moon tilted differently across months. And here, within the ring, they placed fire. Some believe the circle summoned light. Others whisper it honored darkness. The paradox lingers like mist over low grass. On certain nights, when winter stretches long and the air carries the scent of frost, the flame at the center was kindled as an echo of the sun's distant heart. A small, earthly imitation of celestial fire. It flickered beneath stars while the builders stood silent, their breath rising like smoke into cold air. The circle did not demand spectacle. It invited presence. Within the ring, sound softens. Footsteps upon the grass become reverent without instruction. Voices lower instinctively, as though the stones themselves prefer quiet. Even wind seems to bend differently inside the circle, losing its edge, becoming gentler, almost thoughtful. The flame casts light upon the interior faces of stone, revealing cracks etched by centuries. These fissures resemble rivers traced upon a map of time, each crack a record of frost and thaw, of storm and sun, of nights when the circle stood alone beneath wandering clouds. The flame is mortal. The stones endure. Yet in this meeting of brief and eternal, something sacred unfolds. Whispers tell us that on solstice nights, communities gathered here, figures wrapped in wool and woven fiber, carrying torches that fed the central fire. They did not shout at the sky. They did not beg the sun to return. They stood and listened as flame and stone conversed in shadow. Perhaps the circle was never meant to control light. Perhaps it was meant to witness it. The builders understood that the sun would rise whether summoned or not. The moon would arc across the sky with patient indifference. The stars would continue their silent turning long after names carved into stone had crumbled into dust. And so they built not to command, but to align. The flame at the center tonight leans slightly as wind brushes its edge. It brightens briefly, then steadies. The stones hold their vigil, forming a boundary not of exclusion, but of focus. Within this geometry, the human heart feels measured against something vast. Emotion drifts from wonder into tender melancholy. The flame will not last the night. Its fuel is limited, its brightness dependent upon careful tending. Even now, as embers form at its base, there is an awareness of its brevity. And yet, perhaps that is its gift. To burn briefly within a circle of stone is to acknowledge impermanence without fear. Some believe that ancient ceremonies here marked both arrival and departure, the welcoming of dawn at midsummer, the honoring of darkness at midwinter. Fire was lit not to banish night, but to stand with it, an offering placed within vast shadow. Beneath the silence, the circle becomes a chamber without walls. The sky feels closer here. The stones frame constellations like windows carved into earth. Through the narrow gaps between uprights, one can glimpse the slow procession of stars, celestial bodies that once guided migrations, that once shaped myths, whispered around hearths. The flame's glow catches in the hollows of stone, illuminating small carvings nearly erased by time. Spirals, faint lines, symbols whose meanings have slipped beyond memory. Where memory fades, geometry remains. The builders may have vanished, their language dissolved into silence, their names worn smooth by rain. But the circle stands, its alignment holds. Its purpose, whatever it was, continues to echo in stillness. The flame lowers now, its golden tongues shorten. The crackle softens into faint sighs. Embers deepen from bright orange to quiet red. No proclamation marks this transition, no ritual announces the nearing end. It simply fades. The people who once gathered here may have understood this well, that endings need not be declared, that flame does not extinguish in defiance, it rests when its time is complete. The sky above grows darker still as the moon lifts higher. Silver light spills across the tops of stones, marking them with a pale sheen. The circle glows now not with firelight but with lunar grace. The final flicker rises gently, then subsides. The flame becomes ember, the ember becomes glow, and then, almost imperceptibly, it dims into ash. The stones remain. They do not mourn, they do not celebrate, they simply endure. Perhaps the first fire was always meant to be brief, an offering within vast night, a reminder that even light must rest. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the circle of stone and sacred flame is one of those voices, a quiet assurance that the world turns with or without witness, that the sky continues its ancient spiral, that flame and darkness are not enemies but companions in rhythm. Moonlight rests fully now upon stone and earth. The cracks and lichen are illuminated in silver detail. The ground where fire once burned is warm still, holding the memory of heat beneath a thin veil of ash. Wind moves softly through the ring, tracing invisible lines between uprights. The grass beyond sways like a distant sea. The stars continue their patient arc across the heavens. No monument proclaims what occurred here. No inscription explains its purpose. And yet, standing within the circle, even in absence of flame, one feels something subtle and profound. Alignment, humility, belonging within a vast design. The chapter closes in silver stillness. The stones keep their watch. The sky turns slowly overhead. And where the sacred flame once flickered, there remains only a faint warmth beneath ash, quiet, patient, and at peace within the endless night.